The closet had not been opened in 3 months. That was the first fact. The second fact was that Torben had been sitting in front of it for 6 weeks, give or take, and nobody in the Castellano household had taken this seriously until the blood test came back and their pediatrician read them a number that made the room very quiet. Torben was a Bernese mountain dog, 91 pounds, the classic tricolor, black body, rust points, white chest blaze, with the calm, deep eyes of a breed that has been working alongside people for centuries and carries that history in its posture. He was 4 years old. He had been Nadia Castellano's dog since before she married Emilio, since before their son Matteo, since before the house on Birchwood that they had moved into 14 months ago, with the understanding that it needed some work, and the plan to do that work eventually. The closet in question was in the hallway between Matteo's room and the main bathroom. It had been used as a utility closet by the previous owners, and retained, based on Nadia's initial survey, an assortment of old cleaning products and 2 large cans of leftover paint, and had been sealed because dealing with it had not made it to the top of a list that had many items on it. It was on the list. It had been on a list for 14 months. Torben began sitting in front of it on a Tuesday in October. Nadia noticed and moved him and thought nothing of it. By Friday, he had returned to that position 3 more times. By the following Wednesday, she mentioned it to Emilio, who said he thought maybe a mouse had gotten in. He checked for mice. He found no mice. He sealed the gap at the bottom of the closet door with a draft strip, and the matter was considered addressed. Torben sat in front of the draft strip and did not stop. November, December, the beginning of January. He did not sit there every hour. He was not panicked, not frantic, not vocalizing. He was sitting, the way a dog sits in front of something it has decided to watch, patient, organized, still. Some mornings Nadia would come down and find him already there. Some evenings she would look up from making dinner, and he would be in the hallway, that large tricolor shape in the hall light, facing the door. Matteo thought it was funny. He was 23 months old, and the logic of toddlers is its own system. He started bringing his stuffed animals to the hallway to sit with Torben. He called it Torben's spot. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you are in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. In late January, Matteo had a developmental evaluation at his pediatrician's office. Dr. Valentina Cruz, a woman who had been their pediatrician for the first time this year after the move. Standard 24-month assessment. Nadia mentioned that he seemed slightly less energetic than usual. She mentioned his appetite had been uneven for about 2 months. She mentioned he was waking earlier than normal, which she had attributed to the season. Dr. Cruz ran labs, standard well-visit blood work, the kind that generates a printout of numbers and ranges that most parents file and never look at again. She called Nadia the next morning. Matteo's blood lead level was elevated, not in the range of acute crisis, but above the threshold that required investigation, documentation, and source identification. Lead poisoning in a toddler develops silently. The symptoms: slightly reduced energy, appetite disruption, behavioral changes, are nonspecific enough to be attributed to nearly anything else. The exposure had been ongoing. The level in his blood reflected weeks of accumulation. Dr. Cruz gave them a referral and a list of questions. What was in the house? Was it old? Any recent renovation? Any paint? The questions were calibrated by experience to find the source. Emilio opened the closet. For the first time in 3 months, the cans of paint were old, pre-1978, based on the style of the labeling. The lid on one was improperly seated and had been seeping, a slow, consistent leak at the seal, producing lead-containing dust that settled at the base of the closet and seeped under the door through the gap that the draft strip had not fully sealed. Matteo played in the hallway, Torben's spot. The environmental assessor who came the following week used the word continuous. He said, "The exposure at this location has been continuous." He said it, looking at his meter, and then looking at the hallway floor, and then at Torben, who was no longer sitting in front of the closet. because the door was now open and the contents were removed, and the source was identified. Torben was in the living room. He had moved there the morning Emilio opened the door. He hadn't sat in the hallway since. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Nadia thought about 6 weeks. She thought about the draft strip. She thought about mice. She thought about the way Torben had sat every morning in front of that door with the patience of an animal that had no other language to use and had been using the only one available to him for 42 days while a paint can seeped. And her son played in the hallway and called it Torben's spot. Mateo's lead levels came down over subsequent months with environmental remediation and monitoring. He showed no lasting developmental indicators at follow-up. Dr. Cruz said, "Caught early enough to interrupt the accumulation before the critical window." She said it carefully. The word early sat in the room between them. Emilio looked at Torben that evening. Torben was in his usual spot in the living room now because there was nothing left to sit in front of. He had been replaced by an empty closet with fresh paint on the baseboards and a sealed floor and a properly stored alternative. None of the things that had been behind the door were behind the door anymore. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never ask for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Emilio sat on the floor beside him. Torben leaned against his shoulder, that heavy, warm lean of a large dog that has decided where it belongs. The closet problem was on the list, Emilio said to no one. Torben exhaled. His eyes were half closed. Outside, Mateo was napping. His levels were monitored. His hallway was clean. His dog had been trying to put the closet at the top of the list for 6 weeks, with the tools available to him in the only language he had. The next story is about a mother who had 17 years of experience reading children in distress, and the one night her dog read something faster than she could.